This PowerPoint presentation will describe fieldwork procedures for the observational study and is split into 5 sections. The site ID, 2 digits, and agency ID, 2 digits, will be provided by the Research Study Manager at PSSRU. All participant numbers, the final 3 digits, should be allocated by the research team locally to avoid any risk of duplication. It is essential to ensure the correct 7-digit ID code is entered onto the questionnaire, the consent forms, and referral to the study sheet. Participants who subsequently refuse or drop out for any reason will keep their ID number. Each interviewer should be allocated their own individual ID number. This will be a 4-digit number containing the site ID, 2 digits, followed by the interviewer's 2-digit number. The interviewer ID number can be allocated locally by the local research team. This will identify who has completed the questionnaire and ensure the appropriate interviewer is contacted to complete the follow-up interview. NHS R&D offices can offer advice and support to the local research team. Your NHS manager has responsibility for ensuring that you are fully conversant with any safety regulations and for implementing any local lone worker systems. The following slides contain additional directions or information for administering the measures used for this study. Question 4 is a test of attention rather than a test of spelling, so it is important that you spell out the word world and do this for all respondents. Then ask them to spell world backwards. They get a score of 1 point for each correct letter recalled in the correct place. Allow some retrying, provided they succeed fairly quickly. Write what the respondent says below the question to aid scoring. For question 12, when handing the paper to the respondent, hold it out in front of you. If they can only use one arm, change the instructions to account for this. Provided the respondent carries out the command according to what you have asked, they can receive a score. If they have a physical impairment which makes it painful or difficult to reach the floor, you can substitute "put it on your lap" rather than on the floor. Again, provided they place the paper in their lap, they can score a point for this. Interviewers should use their own judgment on whether the person will be able to complete the quality of life measure that follows. One way of doing this is to ask the first 5 questions. Read each question exactly as it is written. If the person does not understand a question, reread, but do not rephrase. If the person doesn't understand the general quality of life final question, repeat the entire sentence and question, and if still not understood, ask, "Thinking about your life in the last week, would you say it was very good, good, fair, or poor?" For question 6, code only one option. If the person with dementia is temporarily living elsewhere, do not code the temporary accommodation, but their permanent address. If the person with dementia doesn't live with the carer, but in their own home with another relative, e.g. spouse, sibling, son or daughter, then code the second option, living in their own home with a relative. Question 7 relates to the tenancy of the house, so if the person with dementia lives with someone else, it is the main occupant's tenancy which is recorded. Question 8, record whether the person with dementia has stayed elsewhere for any short period of time, including overnight. If the carer is unsure whether a home is residential or nursing, please note as uncertain against the most likely option. Other relative includes siblings, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, cousins, etc., regardless of the level of contact, and also includes in-laws, brother or sister-in-law, son or daughter-in-law. Note that in question 2, if he or she has any children, where does his or her nearest child live? If the nearest relative is also their child, question 2 will be the same answer as question 1. Please refer to your manual for the full instructions. It's important to be as accurate as possible in completing this question. Sometimes carers find it difficult to estimate the number of hours spent on activities of daily living, instrumental activities of daily living, and supervision. If necessary, break down ADLs and IADLs into specified activities and ask if their relative needs assistance with each. And if so, how long would they spend on each? And then add up the time spent. If a carer responds all the time, or 24 hours for supervision, establish how many hours sleep the carer gets, subtract this from 24, and confirm this with the carer as the daily number of hours of supervision. It is important to ask at question 11a whether the carer is paid to care for their relative, in case they assume this is not included here. Please check that paid care is in respect of the person with dementia. Question 11b should be completed as usual hours if the person is temporarily off sick and still receiving pay from their employer or intending to return to work. Make a brief note of the circumstances on the questionnaire. Any information about attendance allowance or carer's allowance should be recorded in question 24. Question 15 measures the presence of psychological distress and minor psychiatric morbidity. Question 16 measures the carer's own competence to cope with the demands of caring for a person with dementia. If the carer feels that a question does not apply to them for any reason, code the answer as never, i.e. they do not experience burden in relation to this question. In question 18, the carer is asked to tick the box that most closely describes the level of ability of their relative. Not applicable should be selected only if the person with dementia did not do that activity when they were well. This measure assesses the quality of life of the person with dementia from the point of view of the carer. Even if the DEMQual was completed in questionnaire A with the person with dementia, the proxy version with the carer should always be completed. This instruction represents a change to the written instruction on page 17. This measure may also be self-completed. These questions are a central part of this study and should be completed as accurately as possible, as unit costs will be calculated from these responses. The first two response columns are tick boxes to record receipt of a service for the carer and person with dementia respectively. The next two columns record the number of visits in the last 6 months. Monthly would be 6 visits, weekly would be 26 visits, not 24. If a respondent is unsure about the frequency of a receipt of service, probe for a reasonable estimate. For example, the respondent may know that their relative has seen a GP in the last 6 months, but can't remember how many times. Tick the received column and ask for an estimate and write in, for example, 3 or 4 visits. If the respondent is unable to estimate, write in not known. Some services may provide help to both carer and person with dementia, or be perceived as such, in which case tick both receipt columns and write in the number and duration of visits across the carer relative boxes to indicate that the visit is shared. For question 19, if the individual receives 3 home care visits daily, this will be coded as 3 calls times 7 days times 26 weeks, which is 546 visits in 6 months, assuming no change in level of input. Therefore, it is recommended to record such details in the column on the questionnaire, and you may wish to complete the calculation itself later. In the last column, record as many codes as applied to the received service using showcard 5. If the respondent provides a component of care that is not listed, write in the identifier code and note the type of care on the questionnaire. For question 20, day care, number of visits equate to the number of days attended. A full day's attendance would normally be around 6 hours. If an individual attends daycare, check whether they use transportation and code separately in the box above. Short-term respite care, the number of visits equate to the number of days respite. For each day of respite, a duration of visit would be 24 hours. For question 21, inpatient services, this contains only 4 response columns. Note that columns 1 and 2 are for recording the number of admissions, inpatient, or number of visits, outpatient, and are not tick boxes. Columns 3 and 4 are to record number of days or number of hours of received care. If a respondent has been transferred onto different wards during their stay, record all of these and the number of days spent on each type of ward, even if this was just one stay. For example, 2 days on ICU, 3 days on coronary care, and 3 days on a general medical ward during one visit. Intermediate care would be coded as other inpatient visit, whether provided in hospital or nursing home, if not already captured in question 8. Accident and emergency treatment in A&E shall be coded as outpatient unless the person was admitted to a ward overnight, which would be an inpatient visit. The type of inpatient ward should be coded according to the ward that the person was admitted to, rather than their diagnosis. For example, if they were admitted for a medical complaint, but they were given a bed on a surgical ward, this would be coded surgical. For any inpatient service not specified, provide as much detail as possible to the type of ward, e.g. an ICU, coronary care, orthopaedic, elderly care or geriatric, and so on. Question 21, outpatient services. The first two columns are not tick boxes. Record here the number of visits. Code memory clinic or memory service visits as other outpatient visit. Code under psychiatric outpatient only if participant saw a consultant psychiatrist. Remember, this information is being collected for costing purposes only. This question, unlike questions 19, 20 and 21, doesn't have columns to record type of adaptational equipment for carer and relative separately. Therefore, write in the middle column, in type of adaptational equipment, who receives it in brackets. For example, stair lift, brackets, relative, bath seat, brackets, carer, or both if both carer and person with dementia need the adaptation. If relevant, record carer use of adaptations even if the carer lives elsewhere. These questions include the use of both formal care services and care provided by any family member. For each domain of care, respondents are asked whether the provided care is reliable and is effective, and whether help for their care needs is sufficient. The person with dementia may require help with some, but not all, the examples of care needs in each domain, so a judgment is required about the relevance of the domain. Levels of reliability of help range from reliable always to unreliable or unpredictable. If the person with dementia could do some of these tasks, such as is physically capable of doing but refuses help or needs prompting, care would be unreliable or unpredictable. Record the effectiveness and sufficiency of any provided care, both formal and informal. For those who do not currently receive formal care, but the carer thinks it is needed, this should be coded as extra essential, even if the carer thinks that extra help wouldn't be accepted by the person with dementia. If the carer thinks that extra care might be helpful, but isn't sure, this would be doubtful or mixed. Follow-up interviews should be completed ideally between week 24 and week 28, following the baseline interview. In some circumstances, such as due to the participant illness or holidays, interviews could be completed until week 30. It is the responsibility of the interviewer to inform their local site coordinator if they are having difficulty for any reason recontacting the participant or completing the follow-up. If the follow-up interview is still not arranged at 29 or 30 weeks, please contact the study manager at PSSRU.